The first time I saw it on Wikipedia, my mum said, "Why do they have your age wrong?" I said, "I have no idea."
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com, and you can find me on Twitter as always at redrock_bball. Only 2 games in the NBA on Thursday, but it doesn't mean we didn't have news to discuss, injuries going down, and lots of things for us to look at in those games. And then, of course, a preview of Friday's 10 games across the NBA. Michael Bolton.
Let's get to it.
Let's get to it indeed. We will start, as we always do, with
monstrous line of the night.
And once again, it goes to Jim Harden of the Houston Rockets. Harden played 43 minutes, and I think he's going to be in for a fairly significant workload over the coming weeks. 35 points, 6 triples, 6 rebounds, 12 assists, and 2 steals. The shooting was not great, 30% on 23 attempts. That's a real negative, but also getting to the line is awesome. 15 of 18 from the free throw line. Harden is the number 2 fantasy player this season. I think we're going to see his minutes rise, his production rise with the Chris Paul injury. He's just going to be putting up huge numbers. He's averaging almost 32 points per game, and over the last month, he's averaging 35 points per game with 9 assists and 2 steals. Just staggeringly good numbers from Jimmy Harden, who continues to be fantastic and will continue to be fantastic for the rest of this season, again, with a little bit of a spike coming in his value. I don't know how much more I can talk about Harden. He's been the monstrous line of the night that many times this season, so yeah, he's that again, and he's going to be that over the next couple of weeks, no doubt.
Waiver wire line of the night.
The waiver wire line of the night goes to Derek Jones Jr. of the Miami Heat. Surprisingly, he isn't the deep leaguer of the night because he is rostered in 18% of Yahoo leagues. He is bringing defense at a fantastic level. Now, this is a guy who I was wrong on. I didn't think he was a very good player at all in Phoenix. I thought he could do pretty much nothing apart from jump. But in Miami, who has a significantly better development system than what Phoenix does, he has really developed into a useful player. 27 minutes in today's game. 15 and 8 with 2 steals and 2 blocks. He hit a triple. He got to the line an astonishing 11 times as well and was 8 of 11 from the line. And I guess this begs the question, is Derek Jones Jr. an ad in 12-team leagues? Well, over the last 2 weeks, he's the 91st ranked player. So based on that, you'd have to say yes. It is coming on some numbers which don't feel quite real though. 1.9 steals in 23 minutes. That's astonishingly high. 1.3 blocks as a guard in 23 minutes. Astonishingly high. 56% from the field? No way. He is a 58% free throw shooter over that same time frame. So he is not a good shooter. This is just an astonishingly high level of finishing. He was at 40% last season from the field. Although weirdly, his year before in Phoenix, he was at 56%. So maybe it's not that abnormal. Although over the course of this season, he is at 45% from the field. There are a couple of things we need to pay attention to with the Heat, and we'll talk about this a bit later on. We know that Goran Dragic is out, that's fine, but Justice Winslow was also out of this game, and Dion Wade is still not returned yet. So those 2 guys are going to have an impact on these guys' minutes. Jones had a fantastic performance here, but it's all going to be down to, will he play 23 minutes a night, or will he play 15 minutes a night? Who are going to be the guys that would be removed from the rotation? So today, the Duke Wayne Ellington played only 5 minutes, so he's going to be gone when Winslow's back, no doubt about that. And then you've got to cut another 20 minutes out of other players, whether it's Tyler Johnson, whether it's Derek Jones. And then when Waiters comes back, who is the other guy that loses that playing time? So there are going to be some squeezes in Miami. So this performance, while it looks great, and bringing that defense consistently is really useful. He's had 2 steals in each of the last 2 games. In fact, his last 5 games, Derek Jones has had 3 steals, 5 steals, 0 steals, 2 steals, 2 steals, and then his last 5 games with blocks, 3-0, 2-0, 2. So consistently bringing the numbers in those categories. But it's all about sustainability and when these other guys fit in. And I challenge you, go look at the Miami Heat roster and try and work out a minute allotment when these guys are healthy. You've got 240 minutes per game. Work out how the minutes get distributed. And then try and figure out if all these guys who you all think are must roster guys or must add guys, how they're getting enough playing time. So that's an exercise to do. Your 10, 11 man rotation, depending on how Spoelstra wants to run things. Try and fit those guys into 240 minutes and see how it comes out. And then and you'll see how tough it can be to try and find that right value. But again, all credit to Derek Jones. Those defensive numbers have been fantastic, and he's improved a significant amount of late. Make sure, guys, you are following the Locked On Podcast Network on Twitter, on Instagram. Locked On NBA Net is the handle. You know what it is. It's all of the hosts pushed into one feed on Twitter, plus the Instagram stories breaking down the biggest news of the day over on Instagram. So Locked On NBA Net is the account that you need to go follow. Let's go on to the next one. It is the deep leaguer of the night, and it's Daniel House of the Houston Rockets. 2-game slate. We're scraping the bottom of the barrel here. That's no offense to House, who had 10 points with 2 triples on 3 of 4 shooting with a steal. Not a lot to see there with him. Of course, the Chris Paul injury is going to open up some more minutes, along with Jim Ennis being sidelined, but House is just going to be a deep league 3-point streamer sort of guy. Really interesting the way the Rockets ran things. They had the comic Gary Clark playing all these minutes, and then they brought Daniel House in, and House took Clark's minutes. So what they then did is they cut House, they put Clark from a 2-way onto a regular contract, re-signed House on a 2-way, and then proceeded to play House over Clark. I don't know why they just didn't keep House on the full-time contract. If they were playing him beforehand, they cut him to convert Clark, and now they brought him on a 2-way and they're still playing him over him. It's strange. But anyway, this is just a deeper league sort of guy who sort of trades big games or big-ish games back and forward with Gerald Green off the bench. But there is an extra opportunity opening up here in Houston, and maybe he moves from a 2018 team leaguer into a 16-team league player, and has shown himself, even that little cameo last season in Phoenix, I thought he did enough to be considered an NBA deep rotation player, but an NBA player nonetheless. Daniel House.
Young gun of the night.
It couldn't be anyone else apart from Luka Doncic, I don't think. He was fantastic. The Mavericks did lose, but he had 32 points with 4 rebounds, 5 assists, and 4 steals. Shot 50% from the field, only 69% from the line, unfortunately.
Giggity!
But got there 13 times, and that's, I guess, a negative. If he had have hit a few more free throws, it would have been a huge positive given the volume. He has been, obviously ridiculously good this season, the 40th ranked fantasy player with easy top 20 upside in the coming couple of seasons, and that's going to come on increased efficiency and increased assists. He's averaging 7 assists per game over his last 7, coinciding with Smith being out, scoring 20 points per game in that time frame as well, and with more efficiency from the field, the three-point line, and from the free throw line. He's easily going to be a top 20 player at some point in the very near future. I don't think anyone should have, or surely no one's having any doubts about what Doncic is as a player at this point, or him being a star in the making, if not close to it already. He has been ridiculous. He's going to be a fantasy staple for many years to come. I feel pretty confident about saying that, and congratulations if you got him in any sort of dynasty draft, because it's working out pretty spectacularly at the moment. Really, really good return on your investment in getting him in those formats for a strong game. Again, from Luka Doncic.
I tell a man's not hot.
A little bit harsh again with the dud of the night. With only 2 games, I've only got a very limited amount of players to pick from. It goes to the pencil Harrison Barnes. He had 16 points, and on the surface, that's good because it is good. 3 triples is also good, but just nothing else. 1 rebound, 1 assist, 1 steal, no blocks. He was 6 of 14 from the field and 1 of 2 from the free throw line. The pencil is outside the top 100 this season. He is inside the top 85 over the last month, averaging 20 points per game, which is obviously really useful on good free throws, albeit low attempts. He just doesn't do enough in those other categories. His threes have been mighty impressive. He only hit 1.5 threes per game last season. In the last 14 games, he's hitting 3.4 triples, and he's up to 2.6 per game this season. He's going to be a back-end 12-team league guy for the majority of this season, but I just think the upside with him is limited because he just doesn't do anything. He is averaging 1.1 assists, 0.8 steals, and 0.3 blocks. He just doesn't contribute in those areas. He's the Texas version of Andrew Wiggins. That's who he is, and that's how we should be viewing him as a fantasy guy. Low efficiency, free throws have been okay, attempts are low. He just doesn't do enough to be a stud fantasy guy. He was getting overdrafted significantly. People were taking him at pick 70, which never made any sense. And he's just sort of doing what he does, and that's fine. The 20 points per game over the last month is nice. It's really useful. The threes are super as well, but just no contributions in those other areas do limit his overall fantasy value. So he's the dud of the night, even though it's not that much of a dud of a performance, quite clearly. The plus-minus GOATs, best and worst net rating. Daniel House gets the best at plus 80.8, while the lowest net rating goes to Brandon Knight of the Houston Rockets, who played his largest minutes load of the season with that injury to Chris Paul. We're going to talk about him very, very shortly. Let's talk injuries, though. Some news came out. Punch Bob Shiploke, Bobby Portis is out for the next 2 to 4 weeks with that ankle sprain he suffered late in the Bulls' last game. That means we might get Jabari Parker back into the rotation, although he's dealing with a sore tummy at the moment, so he might not be ready to play. And hopefully, it means more Chandler Hutchison. Portis was that fringe 12-team league guy, out for a month. I think you can end up dropping him in those circumstances. He's not good enough to hold on without no IR. Of course, with IR, you always just add a player there if you've got that opportunity. Hutchison gets some value now in deeper leagues. I am not going to add Jabari Parker in 12-team leagues. I'm just not doing it. Maybe in a 16-team league, he can get 15 minutes a night, but I think Hutchison's going to get that boost in minutes there for the Bulls. Portis was playing almost exclusively as a power forward. No, that's not true. He's playing some minutes at center, but I think you'll see Lopez and Carter take those center minutes with Markin, and then Hutchison getting the power forward minutes, and maybe you get a 10 minutes sampling of Jabari Parker. Dennis Smith missed today's game with his wrist injury. He's out for the next couple as well, so that means Jalen Brunson in deeper leagues gets a boost, and JJ Barea had a big game today. He can be even a streamer for these next couple of games. Kyle Lowry also out for the next couple of games with that back injury. Go and add Fred VanVleet, who's been a top 50 player over the last week or so, with Lowry and Leonard sidelined on alternate games. He's putting up some good numbers, Freddie, so go and add him. I worry about Lowry as a 32, 33-year-old guy who's had significant injury problems in his past. These back problems have been persisting for a while. You're not going to be able to really trade him away for your great value. Now, if you do trade Kyle Lowry away now, you're doing the absolute antithesis of fantasy basketball, and that is you are selling low, which I don't really see the point of that, because people aren't going to be looking to pay your prime or even solid Kyle Lowry price at the moment, given he's dealing with a back injury. But if he gets back and healthy and playing, I'd try to see if I could deal him away for any sort of top 35 player. I just do worry about recurrence of this injury. And then, of course, the big news today, Chris Paul pinged his hammy. Again, we've seen this happen multiple times for Paul, and an MRI is scheduled for Friday. D'Antoni says he's going to be out for a while. I always feel like players in the NBA come back too soon from hamstrings. Over here, like playing in the Australian Football League, if a player does his hammy, that's bang. That's like 3-4 weeks almost immediately. Like, it's just, okay, you've done your hammy, I'll see you in a month. I feel like in the NBA, a player does his hammy 3 games, then you come back, and then something happens again. We've already seen James Ennis do his hamstring twice this season. It just seems to be always the case that hamstrings, people come back from them way too early in the NBA, and I'm not really sure what that is. Again, over here, 3 weeks, bang, you're done. I'll see you 3 or 4 weeks if you do a hammy, and that's if you come back in 2, it's not heard of. So I think we're going, especially at Chris Paul's advanced age with significant hamstring problems in the past, I would be pretty stunned if we see him within 3 weeks. I would say 4 weeks is more realistic. D'Antoni's already saying it's going to be a while because it's a hamstring and then no MRI. So what that means is, I've talked about this ad nauseum as well, is when Eric Gordon plays with James Harden and Chris Paul, he's not a 12-team league guy. When one of them goes down, he's a must-add player. So we are in that scenario now. So Eric Gordon is a must-add player. Simple as that. Michael Carter-Williams, they claimed they were going to give him minutes. He did not see the court at all in a game that Chris Paul didn't play. I can see him maybe being a 10-minute-a-night guy. And then in deeper formats, Brandon Knight played 18 minutes here. I can see him pushing to 20-odd minutes a night, not being anywhere near a 12 or probably even a 14-team league guy, maybe a 16-team league ad. Well, Gerald Green started the second half for Paul. He won't be a 12-teamer, I don't believe either, more of a 14, probably more 16 as well. Push Harden across to point guard, Gordon at shooting guard, Gerald Green at small forward, and then when Ennis comes back, that'll ease some of that burden there. So the clear winner there is Eric Gordon. He becomes that must-add player, and then you get a whole bunch of deeper league type guys like Green, like Knight, like perhaps Daniel House, and then Ennis when he comes back. But Gordon is the clear must-add player there in Houston. Again, I wouldn't be dropping Chris Paul if you don't have an IR slot. Let's wait to see what this MRI reveals. But I've got a feeling he's going to be pretty limited for big chunks of the rest of this season. I see people mentioning they think he's not going to play any more back-to-backs the rest of this year. That's just not what D'Antoni seems to do. I don't think that's going to... Look, it could be. I just don't think that they'll be that extraordinarily cautious with Paul, but he'll come back. He'll be limited for a bit when he does return. He'll miss probably a couple of back-to-backs early on, but I don't think that when we get to March, he's going to still be missing games, assuming he hasn't hurt himself again. It's not great for the Rockets, who are already battling for a playoff spot themselves and lost today. And they don't need that Chris Paul injury news at all. If you guys have a company and you're looking for a new way to reach customers, podcasts are a great way to go about it. Podcast listeners are 60% more likely to interact with the sponsors they hear on their podcast. Go join our sausage sizzle and advertise to our 98% male audience that is higher educated and higher earning than your traditional media audiences. So email me at redrockfantasybasketball@gmail.com if you're interested in having your podcast mentioned right here. Not your podcast, your company mentioned right here. Let's go in now to look at these games in more detail. There were only the two of them, so we'll go straight into those now. The first game was that Houston defeat against the Miami Heat, a disappointing loss for the Rockets. They were up, I believe, when Chris Paul went down, and then it didn't all end up all that well after that. On the Rocket side of things, we talked about Harden already. Eric Gordon, 20 points, 5 triples, 3 assists, and a block. These are the performances he puts in when one of those other guards are down, so that's a no-brainer. While PJ Tucker had his second consecutive strong game, 14 and 7 with 3 threes and a steal. That's coming off a double-double in his last game. I think Tucker's more of a 14-team league ad, but that was solid enough. While Clint Capella struggled through 6 points, 14 boards, and a block. He'll be better than that, we know. While Gerald Green had 5 and 6 in his 25 minutes, and Brandon Knight in those 18 minutes where he was the worst net rating of the day, he did have 3 points with a triple, but no other numbers. A guy who struggled in those games before his ACL in Phoenix. He hasn't played almost for 2 years. It's pretty hard to get too excited with him outside of deeper leagues. Now on Miami, we're trying to pass through what was going to happen on this team without Dragic there long term. But it's hard to know. No Waiters, no Winslow in this game. They could both be back in the next one. And they played an 11-man rotation here. As I said, the Duke Wayne Ellington played only 5 minutes. He'll be turfed out of that rotation for Winslow. But fitting everyone in is tough. Tyler Johnson started with Winslow out, 32 minutes, 19 and 4, 2 triples and 2 blocks, 6 of 10 shooting. Fantastic. Solid performance. But will he be a 24-minute-a-night guy or a 30-minute-a-night guy? We'll try and work it out. I think he's closer to the 25 than the 30. Derek Jones, we talked about already. Joshua Richardson was fantastic, 22, 6, and 7. There were people legitimately dropping him after that shooting slump, which is never a move that you should make. He's back on track of late, while Hassan Whiteside actually played minutes in the fourth quarter. Only 9 points, but 17 rebounds and 2 steals, while Bam Adebayo played 24 minutes as well. 3, 9, and 4. I think that you move on from Bam in 12-team leagues. Something that we sort of anticipated happening. A guy I don't think the Heat should necessarily have in their rotation, but Spoelstra loves him, is Scooter Magruder, but his minutes and production are trending in the wrong direction for him anyway. 5 points in 24 minutes, and that could be an option to get Waiters and Winslow back in, is take Ellington and Magruder out. Not sure Spoelstra will do it, but I think it's a move they've got to consider. Kelly Olynyk was a little bit disappointing, 7 and 9 in 22 minutes. I still think that he can have 12-team league value, but he's not a must-roster guy, and he's not a guy you have to hold on to for dear life. As I said, this rotation is still utterly confusing, and we're still in a situation where Jim Johnson can't even get 20 minutes a night, who was one of their best fantasy guys for the last 2 seasons in 26. He can't even get 26 minutes. He can't get anywhere near that, and that doesn't look like changing anytime soon, unless they're waiting for him to play himself back into shape, and then you've got to take 6 minutes away from somebody else, and that gets even harder to work out their rotation. So it is a bit of a nightmare trying to work out what's going on with Miami to predict their fantasy value. The second game of the night, the Dallas Mavericks lost to the Clippers 125-121. DeAndre Jordan pulled in 22 rebounds. Wouldn't kill him to block a shot, though. He had 0 of those and was 3 of 4 from the line, while Jose Juan Barea, or Juan Jose, never know which way it is. I apologize, JJ. 27 minutes, 19 points with 8 assists. He has that stream value while Dennis Smith is out, while Devin Harris also chimed in with a cheeky 13 points in 19 minutes. Very little else happening there with the Mavs. Wesley Matthews had 6 points in 27 minutes. I still think that he can be a back-end 12-team league guy, but he's not for everybody. So you can have a look there. Well, the burner, Jalen Brunson, had 7 points in 21 minutes. He had that nice little bump when he first came into the starting lineup for Smith, and he's fallen way off now. So I think we're looking at him just as a deeper league guy who will very clearly go out of the rotation when Dennis Smith returns. Dirk, man, I don't know, 6 minutes, 0 points. Dwight Powell played just 7 minutes. Maxi Kleber played 8 minutes. The return of Dirk has hurt both of those guys. Dirk, I don't think, is going to have really any fantasy value outside of very deep leagues, and they're taking it very, very slowly with him. For the Clippers, Lou Williams was a surprise return, 26 points with 8 assists and 2 steals. 38% usage is not realistic. 75% shooting is not realistic, but it's good to have him back. While the Rooster had a Clipper career high for him, 32, 6 and 4 with 2 blocks for Danilo Gallinari. And it's good to see the table Montrezl Harrell back on track. 18, 6 and 4 in 28 minutes with 2 blocks. He had a massive slump before. Still had to be a guy you held on to, and we're seeing that pay dividends now. While Toby Harris, 16, 9 and 5. A disappointing night from Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, 4, 1 and 1 in 19 minutes. There is absolutely zero reason why Avery Bradley should be playing 28 minutes. He is not good. He is one of the worst starting players in the NBA, if not the worst starter in the NBA, and he should never be playing more minutes than Shai. I still do believe in Shai as a 12-team league guy, but if you want to move on from him, I totally understand that, and I don't think you're going to be losing some sort of top 50 upside craziness there with Shai. I still just do believe that he will get better. Marcin Gortat also is washed, 4 and 7 in 12 minutes for him. Patrick Beverley had been putting up some good numbers with Williams out, but back to 25 minutes here, 8, 5 and 2, so any sort of fringe 12 or maybe even 14-team league value for Pat Bev is probably out the window. While Avery Bradley, man, 2 points, 1 rebound, and 2 assists. That is just bad. He is bad. He's so bad. I don't understand how he has just become so bad. It's really quite disturbing to see the massive drop-off in Patrick Beverley's form of late. Let's go in now and look at some DFS action. We're going to be covering Friday's games. First of all, let's cover the perfect lineups. On DraftKings, Lou Williams, James Harden, Eric Gordon, PJ Tucker, DeAndre Jordan, JJ Barea, Derek Jones Jr., and Luka Doncic. That totaled 337 for a total cost of 49,900. And then on FanDuel, Tyler Johnson, JJ Barea, Harden, Doncic, Derek Jones, the Rooster, Jim Johnson, the Table, and DeAndre Jordan totaled 368.3, and that cost $59,300 dues. All right, guys, let's look at these 10 games for Friday. We're looking at FanDuel pricing on today's show. The first game we look at is the Cleveland Cavaliers taking on the Toronto Raptors. The Raptors are 12.5-point favorites. The total is 206. Kyle Lowry is out. He's likely out for the next couple of games as well, but there is still a significant blowout risk here. For this one, Matty Dellavedova missed the last game for the Cavs. He is questionable here. While it is the first game of a back-to-back for the Raptors, so I guess we'll have to check on Kawhi Leonard's status. I believe that he will play, and I believe he'll play both of the back-to-backs. But we'll just see on that, while Serge Ibaka is also questionable. So quite a few injuries for us to pay attention to here. If Ibaka is out, then you look at someone like Greggy Monroe.
As Greg runs in, we realise this could get dangerous.
And you look at Pascal Siakam, who gets a significant boost in that sort of a scenario. At point guard, I love Fred VanVleet here, 5,300. He's averaging 29 over his last 5. In fact, his lowest score in those last 5 has been 26 points with a mixture of Lowry and Leonard out. There's no Lowry again. He'll start. He'll play minutes. It's a great matchup. I love VanVleet here. Probably one of the best plays on the board. Actually, I got the wrong game up there. Emmanuel Mudiay was appearing in my list of point guards, which he clearly is not one of those involved in this game. Colin Sexton, that's the one. The Padawan, Colin Sexton, 5,400 4,700 for Sexo. The salary is dropping because his production's nowhere near where it needs to be. 16-point average over the last 5, a significantly negative matchup for Sexton here, so I'm not feeling super into him as a play here. He could be a tournament guy, but that's really about it. While you look at shooting guards next, Delon Wright at 3,900, an expanded role coming for him. He's been getting you 20 plus points a night recently, and with Lowry out, he should be getting those extra minutes, and so I'm interested in him. Dan Green, not so much. Jordy Clarkson at 54, strong return from a one-game absence for Clarko last game. He put up 28 points in 35 minutes, and if Dellavedova sits, I do like Clarko quite a bit here. As for Dally, he's at 4,500. I'm not really that interested there. Small forward, the fun guy, Kawhi Leonard.
I'm a fun guy.
He's at 10,400. Yeah, a really strong play here. I think he can get you that 50 pretty comfortably, which on FanDuel is not a bad spot to be in. While 47 for Chetty Osman is really just a deeper league guy. Rocket Rodney Hood, always tournaments, in the Jedi OG Anunoby.
Hello there.
Looking at a strong game last game for him anyway, but not really seeing too much there for the Jedi to just be a strong option. Power forwards, Larry Nance, we have to love him here. 7,300. He is getting everything going his way, averaging 42 over the last 5. There could still be some Drew Dickery at some point, but I feel good with Larry Nance here. He's just consistently putting up numbers. While Ibaka at 6,900.
Giggity.
If Serge, now he's questionable. If Serge plays, I like him. I think it might be just a bit too high, and there's probably going to be better options out there. Whereas Pascal Siakam at 6,900, if Ibaka is out, I'm all about Pascal at that price. He dropped 40 last game with Serge on the shelf. For the centres, you got Greggy Munro at 43 and Ante Zizic at 3,700. Munro dropped 26 in the start with Ibaka out. That would obviously become an option if Ibaka is ruled out of this one, but otherwise it's a little bit hard to use Greg Munro. Over on DraftKings, we look at this game. Van Vliet, Nance, really the big standouts here. Kawhi at 95 also looks pretty good, and Ibaka at 5,900. I'm really big into that price in comparison of where it sits on FanDuel. I think that's a much stronger option. Alec Burks a little bit in play as well on FanDuel at 4,300, and the Padawan at 45. Still, of course, struggling, but I don't hate that as a tournament option for big Colin Sexton. Let us move on now to the next game up for Friday. It's the Detroit Pistons and the Charlotte Hornets. The Hornets are 4-point favorites. The total is 217.5. This is a battle for playoff spots in the Eastern Conference. We thought it might be the 8 seed, but maybe these guys can even push higher into the 6 seed spot. Injury-wise, I think we're pretty okay in this game, aside from the guys who are ruled out like the little dog and Ish Smith already. At point guard, Kemba's at 9,600. That's pretty expensive for Kemba. He was really strong last game with 51 points, but hasn't been at that 9,600 level for a while. So I'm not really certain that he's a good option here. While Reggie Jackson at 55, another strong performance from him last game, but also consistency always remains an issue. With Reggie Jackson, and playing time can be a concern for him also. So I'm not totally into Reggie Jackson here. There are better options on the board. The Duck, Luke Kennard at 3,600, really not getting enough playing time. It would be a wild tournament sort of a guess. It is a positive matchup for the Duck, but I don't really think that he's a super interesting guy. Reggie Bullock has been on fire lately, dropped 41 last game. He's at 5,000. He does really rely upon that high efficiency shooting, and if that's not there, then not much comes. So that's why I look at him more for tournaments. Malik Monk was out of the rotation last game, while the Shark, Bruce Brown,
Baby shark,
he's unlikely to register too much interest. That small forward, Nick Batum's at 47, has done fairly well against Detroit in the past, a 29 average over the last 3, which would be valuable at that salary. I'm just not into him at this point. Kid Gilchrist, Miles Bridges, Stan Johnson, no from me for all of those. Marvin Williams, really putting up big numbers at the moment, averaging 26 over his last 5, which at 5,600 is okay. He went big last game as well. He does have a tendency to go a little bit up and down, but I like Marvin at that 5,600 price tag, while Blakey Griffin's at 93. He's giving you 40 plus every night. In fact, his lowest score over the last 5 has been 41. So really some strong value from Blake Griffin of late, and he is a good option here pretty clearly. At centre, I like Cody Zeller at 53. A disappointing game from Code last game, but I do think that he can be a 25 floor type of a player. Well, I love Drummond at 9,400, averaging 51 the last 3 times out against Charlotte. Some of that's the Dwight Howard Charlotte Hornets, but I do like Drummond as a real 50-point chance and almost a 45-point floor for Drummo here. Really, really interested in him in this matchup. Over on DraftKings, I like Marvin. I like Jeremy Lamb there. Drummond, Kemba comes in at a better price at 86. Blakey Griffin at 94. Cody Zeller at 5,000 looks okay over on DraftKings as well. Next game up on the slate for us to discuss. It's the Atlanta Hawks traveling to take on the New York Knicks. The Knicks are favored by 2, and the total is a very big 230. So this is a large total with a narrow spread, which always lends itself pretty nicely to stacking. There are a couple of those games on the slate today. The Bucks and Celtics game is another one of those, and even the Pelicans-Lakers, although that could get a little bit ugly depending on some injury news. But this one here, close spread, big total, it's always a positive to look at in that regard. For the point guard spot, we're looking at Manny Mudiay at 6,400. Absolutely atrocious shooting from Mudiay in the last game, but he is a guy that's getting significant minutes and has been putting up pretty strong numbers prior to that last performance, averaging 38 points over the last 5. The salary's come down by a whopping $900 on the back of that last game. He gets a super positive matchup. I'm actually in on Mudiay here. I think this is a pretty good spot to use him. Jeremy Lin at 42 showed us what he can do last game, 24 points in 24 minutes, but I'm not really feeling that as a good one. While Trae Young at 6,900.
Giggity!
I think that's probably too high for Young. The matchup is okay, although the Knicks have been decent against point guards. Not really certain with the way that the minutes and the shots are falling or not falling, as the case may be. For Timmy Hardaway, he is at $7,000, 41 points last time. No one's really going to be able to guard him. It's all a matter of if those shots go down, and that can be a problem. But 7,000 is a pretty appealing price for Hardaway, while Kevin Huerter at 48. I like the tournament upside here for Huerter, who's getting a lot of minutes and can be a 35-point guy, but also a 20-point floor doesn't make him super appealing. Damo Dotson's back in action. He's at 3,800. That would just be for tournaments, while Bazemore, the price for Bazemore at 68 is not ideal. I do think that Kent can be a 30-point guy here, which is a pretty decent floor for cash, so I wouldn't be ruling him out completely. Small forward, Bembry, no. Vince Carter, minimum salary, no. Lance Thomas, no. Hazonia, I wouldn't be shocked if Hazonia doesn't even play. The power forwards is where there's a little bit of intrigue for the Knicks side. 6,100 for Noah Vonleh and 6,300 for the Fort, Kevin Knox. I like Knox more for tournaments because if anything comes outside of points, he'll beat that number, but that's the real challenge with him. While Vonleh is contributing in weird categories. Sometimes he'll have 6 assists or 3 blocks or 12 rebounds and 4 points. It's all over the place what he does. The minutes tend to be a little bit inconsistent as well for Vonleh. 6,100 is okay. The only reason I'd really be interested in Vonleh here is the matchup against the Hawks. While the Baptist John Collins at 8,400, big men, they dominate the Knicks, and Collins has been putting up big numbers. Now that's a pretty big salary for the Baptist, but I don't hate it mainly because of this matchup and the increased pace. At centre, Enes Kanter's at 6,700. I think he gets 30 here against the Hawks pretty comfortably. I'm not sure they're going to be playing him off the court with their offensive form. So I think that he is in as solid a spot as he can get to, while The Undertaker, Dwayne Dedman. He is at 6,600, has been playing really well, 32 average over the last 5. I think that might be a bit high, but big men against the Knicks, we know that they can go off. But that last game where they gave those extra minutes to Alex Leonard did worry me a little bit there with Dedman. So I think that price is probably just marginally prohibitive. I wouldn't be going back to the Len well, though. On DraftKings, where are we? We've got Kevin Huerter, I like as a tournament guy, and the Baptist at 7,800. John Collins also come in as pretty strong options. The Ford at 6,000 and Vonleh at 56 also look relatively appealing over on DraftKings. All right, let's move on to the next game. We've got the Indiana Pacers and the Brooklyn Nets. The Pacers are 2-point favorites. The total 211.5. The Nets have won 7 consecutive games. They're going for 8 in a row here. At point guard, you got Dazza Collison at 4,500. Tyreek Evans is questionable, so maybe that helps Collison. His salary is starting to come down. I'd probably end up fading Colo here. While Spencer Dinwiddie at 7,100, just consistently putting up big numbers. He has been really, really fantastic of late. 7,100 might be a little bit high, especially against a Pacers team who slows things down and does provide good guard defense. I'm not really totally into Spence in this one. At shooting guard, Victor Oladipo's at 8,300, has torched the Nets in the past. Sorry, my mistake. But Oladipo, he's torched them in the past. The Nets this season are quite good at defending shooting guards, and Oladipo's not quite on his game. That means it's somewhat of a fade here. While D'Angelo Russell at 69.
Giggity!
So many 6,900s today. He is obviously putting up some big numbers, but also, last game wasn't that good, just the 19 points for D'Angelo. He's more of a tournament player. For the small forwards, you've got Damari Carroll and you've got Smokin' Joe Harris. At 4,500 for Smokin' Joe, I actually think that he is absolutely a cash type of a player whose role is relatively consistent, while Bojan Bogdanovic at 5,000 bounced back last game, but I'm still only looking at him for tournaments. While we know that Alan Crabb, the blue swimmer, is out. So moving over to power forward, Rowdy Roddy and Kurucs at 4,000. I think that's a strong GPP upside, 24, 25 point, maybe you can go higher than that ceiling, maybe 30-point ceiling, but he's really only that sort of a player in terms of GPP. And Rondé Hollis Jefferson at 54. Just no way of being able to have any reliability in what Rondé does in on a consistent basis. So I think that he is a tournament player only. Domantas Sabonis at 65, a really positive matchup, big men against the Knicks. So Nets, wow, that's twice. I apologize, Brooklyn fans. 6,500 for Domantas. I think that's a pretty strong cash play. And then at center, Miles Turner versus Jarrett Allen. Allen's at 63, Turner's at 73. Big men against the Pacers struggle. Big men against the Nets go off. Turner is on a strong roll at the moment, and I actually don't mind him at that sort of a salary. I do think that he can have some pretty decent value at that 7,300 price tag. Thaddeus Young, should have talked about him. He's at 58. He's a tournament guy going up against his former team. Of course, he struggled against them in the past. He's on a really strong run, but the performances are starting to fade, so I'd probably end up fading him as well. On DraftKings, we're looking at Jarrett Allen as a cash play because he's down at 5,100, so I'm in on that. Rondé and Rodion's at tournament plays, 49 and 3,700 for Hollis Jefferson and Karooks, respectively. There's a little bit of value in both of those guys, while 6,600 for Domantas Sabonis also has a level of appeal. Let's go on to the next game. We're looking at the Orlando Magic and the Chicago Bulls. The Magic are 3-point favorites. The total is 204. There's no Zach LaVine, no Punch Bob Shiplock for the Chicago Bulls. That is a ton of usage that needs to go into other areas. So be on the lookout for some real value opening up in this game. At point guard, Cameron Payne, who's also questionable. He's at 3,700. He's getting some extra minutes. I don't think you'd want to really use him here. The guy you want is Chris Dunn, 7,500. That's a price rise of $500. So it makes him a bit weary of using him. But also that usage is going to have to go his way. He played 34 minutes last game, so the minutes restriction is done. I'm happy to use Dunn here, while Archer Jacquino's at 39. He will likely start again with LaVine out. He's as up and down as they come. That would make him a tournament guy. DJ Augustin at 4,800. I think that's too expensive for Deej. Shooting guards, Evan Fournier's at 57. Like the matchup for Fournier. I think he's a good cash play. Well, Justin Holiday can't do anything at the moment. That would just be for tournaments. I cannot trust his shot at this stage. The John Simmons is questionable for the Magic. I should have mentioned that one. While Nick Vucevic returns at small forward, you got Chandler Hutchison now with Punch Bob out. Jabari Parker still dealing with not being in the rotation and dealing with a stomach issue. There's going to be an opportunity here for Hutch to get some minutes. Now he's not a great option, but he has had a 25-point game this season, and at minimum salary, that's at least worth throwing into your GPP pool, especially if Jabari happens to be sidelined. The power forward mix, we've got Wendell Carter Jr., the Block Panther at 5,600. I don't know what sort of dickery Jim Boylan's going to throw out there, so that gives me some level of concern. But with Portis out, he's not going to be able to play any minutes at center. Not that he was playing a ton there anyway, but I think there's some upside there in Carter. Aaron Gordon at 71 is really not doing anything, but if there's ever a team to get you back on track as a big man, it could be the Bulls. He has struggled against Chicago in the past, to be fair, but a lot of big men do tend to put up big numbers here. And then Lauri Markkanen at 7,500. Disappointing last game. Only the 6 shots. Had 18 FanDuel points in that game. Should be getting way more touches than that. And I imagine that'll be rectified in this game with Portis out. I think at 75, he's still just a tournament guy. I love Vooch at 9,000 back after the birth of his child. He should smash that number against this Bulls team. While Robin Lopez and Mo Bamba.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Bamba had 31 in that start with Vucevic out, but he goes back to limited minutes in this game, and his price is already up to 4,800, so that is it feels like a bit of a no to me. On DraftKings, the Block Panthers at 4,900, Wendell Carter. I like that tournament upside. Chandler Hutchison at 3,000 as a tournament guy as well, while Vooch and Lowry at 92 and 7,000 respectively look pretty good, as does Evan Fournier at 5,500 on DraftKings. Let's go on to the next game. We are looking at the Milwaukee Bucks taking on the Boston Celtics. Probably the game of the day here. The Celtics are favored by a point. The total is 224.5. Al Horford is out for Boston, along with Aaron Baines. So there's obviously some value opening up there in that front court for Boston. Marcus Morris is currently questionable, while Gershon Yabusele is not on the injury report, so he could be back getting his 2 minutes and not having any impact. At point guard, Eric Bledsoe, 7,100. We know Bledsoe struggles against Boston. He struggled in the last game, only 24 minutes. I think that could make his roster percentage really low, and that could make him an interesting tournament guy, but that's as far as I'd want to go there. While Terry Rozier at 4,000, I'm just not sure Terry's going to play enough. Although if Marcus Morris misses, it does push everyone down a position, and it gives Rozier an element of value here. But for all his exploits in the playoffs against the Bucks, he's still averaging under 20 FanDuel points the last 3 regular season meetings. Kyrie's at 9,400 because he's churning out massive numbers consistently. I like Kyrie here, a pretty strong cash option. While at shooting guard, you got Jalen at 41, not interested in that. Chris Middleton at 7,000. has done very well against Boston in the past, so I don't mind using Chrissy in this one. But the one we want to really look at here is Marcus Smart, who's averaging a whopping 31 points over the last 5 at 5,400. That's pretty strong, and it is a positive matchup for him. Now, if Marcus Morris is out, I'm all in on Marcus Smart. If Morris plays, I have a little bit more hesitation with Smart, but his ability to register steals, which on FanDuel we know they're worth 3 points each, that's a huge boost to what he can do. So I do like Marcus Smart here quite a bit. Gordo Hayward's at 6,000 against the Bucks. I'm not really sure with Gordo. He just isn't getting enough shot attempts or enough playing time. It would just be a tournament sort of a punt. While Yanni's at 11,700. I think there are some better high price guys available on the FanDuel slate than Yanni, but he's still obviously a pretty strong play. At power forward, Vanilla Tice is 4,000. He would likely get the start at centre. Now, whether he plays more minutes than the Rock DJ Robbie Williams, it remains to be seen. But Tice has had that 57-point game this year. I believe that was against the good old Chicago Bulls.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
We don't know if he's going to be able to get back to that level. In fact, I'd be pretty doubtful, but he is a pretty strong tournament play. While Marcus Morris at 6,000. Yeah, I can't get it out of my head that that's just too high for Marcus Morris at 6,000. He can be a 30-point guy, but he can also be a 20-point guy pretty comfortably. Jace Tatum's at 69.
Giggity!
Just another one in the 69 crew. I think that's probably a little bit high for Tatum unless Morris is out. Well, DJ Wilson's been impressive of late. Ersan Ilyasova is out of this game, so Wilson's going to get another opportunity. He's at 39. He dropped 24 last game. Maybe, probably not. But maybe. He has been impressive, no doubt. At centre, the Rock DJ, 4,600 for Robbie Williams. He had 36 points in that last game. We know that he is a guy that goes for over a point per minute in fantasy value. At 4,600, you get him 22 minutes. He should be able to exceed that. He should be getting close to those sort of minutes in this game with both Baines and Horford sidelined. I do like him. I prefer his upside over Tice, even though Tice has had the bigger game this season. Williams is doing his stuff in really limited minutes, so I think he's worth a look. While Brookie Lopez at 4,900, the salary has dropped significantly for Lopez. The last couple of games haven't been that good, and the Celtics do limit centers, but of course with Baines and Horford both out, that's a little bit of a different scenario, although Williams is a pretty strong defender. 4,900 for Lopez. I'm not sure how Williams is going to go chasing him out to the three-point line consistently. And that's something you should maybe be factoring in when thinking about Williams and his blocks for this game, is that he's going to be not as close to the rim. And that might be actually an impact with Lopez there. So that is worth mentioning and worth monitoring. Over on DraftKings, I like Hayward as a tournament play here, only 5,400. Yanni at 11,000 is pretty strong. Chrissy Middleton at 65 and Jason Tatum at 61 have cash and tournament value. While the Rock DJ, Robbie Williams at 3,800, that looks to be one of the better plays on the board. He had 31 DraftKings points last game, and at 3,800, if you get 31 points, I think you feel pretty happy about it. The next game we take a look at, we've got the Minnesota Timberwolves and the San Antonio Spurs. The Spurs are 4-point favorites. Total is 220.5. Obviously, I can't spell if you're watching that video. The Spurs are blowing out everyone. As I highlighted on yesterday's program, they are just winning every game by huge amounts. So let's see how this one actually goes down. We know Jeff Teague is out.
My name is Jeff.
That's really the only big injury news here. Derek White started last game for the Spurs, played 34 minutes. Only 19 points. He's really just a tournament guy at that $4,200 price tag, while Derrick Rose's salary has skyrocketed, $7,300. Now, he obviously exceeded that last game, 48 points in 38 minutes, and he's going to get every opportunity in the world to do it again with Teague out, but that is a pretty significant price bump, and I'm not certain that makes him a must-roster guy like he was on Wednesday. Brittany Forbes at 38, Tyus Jones not really keen on either of those guys. At shooting guard, Josh Okogie's at 3,600. He can be a 25, 30-point guy in those minutes that he does get now that Teague is out. So a tournament option, while DeMar DeRozan at 83. He's probably priced $500 too high, but I think his floor is relatively strong to be a cash option, while Wiggo at 6,200. I actually don't think Wiggins is a terrible play at 6,200. There are definitely better ones out there, but he's not a horrendous option. At small forward, Rudy Gay just churning along, but that 6,500 price tag I believe is too high. While Bob Cov's at 62, I'd take Covington over Gay, save the $300 pretty much every day of the week. Bertans, Cunningham, no. Power forward, LaMarcus Aldridge, 8,000. He's getting it back on track. He's done well against Minnesota with a 46 average the last 3 times out. I think that is a pretty rock-solid cash play for Aldridge. Well, Dario Saric, I actually really like him here. He's getting the big minutes, or bigger than we anticipated. His lowest score in his last 5 has been 25, and at 5,400, that's a very, very good floor. He's a 30-point upside plus player. I'm in on Saric here. Taj Gibson, I'm the opposite of. Jakob Poeltl's at 3,800. He's getting increased minutes. The production's not fantastic. I think maybe in a tournament, but even then, not super interested. While Karl Anthony Townsy at 9,300. A little bit disappointing in his last game. The shot just wasn't falling, but I don't think that this is a bad spot for Towns. You should be looking at 45 points plus, and that's obviously in play. Over on FanDuel, on DraftKings, it's a Kogi at 3,300. I really, really like that salary. You can look at DeMar at 8,000. I think Townsy at 93 is okay, but not super strong. While I love the 57 and 58 for Covington and Wiggins, I think both of those guys have value over on DraftKings. Let's go on to the next game. We've got the Memphis Grizzlies and the Sacramento Kings. The game is even at the moment, even spread. The total 212. Both of these teams coming off losses in the last game. Iman Shumpert and Bogdan Bogdanovic are both questionable, while the Grizzlies have Joakim Noah, JaMychal Green, and Omri Caspi as questionable, along with Kyle Anderson and Mike Conley as probable. So some injury news here, obviously. If Bogdanovic and Shumpert, one of those two guys are out, then the other one benefits. If both of them are out, we look at Justin Jackson as that upside sort of a player in that scenario. For the Grizzlies, if Noah is out, it boosts Gasol's value, and if Noah and Green are out, then Ivan Rabb becomes your cheap option who could come in and really start to rack up some numbers. Of course, it does solidify a little bit of Jaren Jackson's numbers also. At point guard, Conley's at 8,400. I'm happy with that. I think there's a solid floor. It's a decent matchup, while De'Aaron Fox at 8,300 is just cranking out the big games. 58 points in his last game. He should be close to a 40-point guy. So I think both Conley and Fox in a even spread game, having both of those guys in lineups, I think that's totally fine. If I was picking one, I'd probably pick Conley, but it's pretty close to a coin flip. Bogdan's at 6,000. I'd only be using Bogdanovic if Shumpert was out. That's the only scenario I'd really consider him. While Shumpert the same at 3,900. While good old Budrick Hield, he's at 6,900.
Giggity!
Also, how weird was the news today of it coming out that Hield is actually a year older than everybody has him listed as the NBA, as Wikipedia, as everyone. Everyone has him listed as 25 when he is actually 26. That is an absolutely stunning revelation to me. The fact that teams obviously didn't know this. Well, not obviously. I would imagine that the teams didn't actually know that this was his age, yet he did, never spoke up about it, never said anything about it until now. So would the Pelicans have drafted him at that spot if they knew that he was a year older than they thought he was? Would the Kings have traded for him in the Cousins trade if they knew he was a year older? He is older than Bradley Beal. Like, that is a stunning number to me. It's very, very weird. Anyway. It's not Shabazz Muhammad type of scenario, but it is interesting nonetheless. Hield has been on fire. He's at 6,900. I don't know how you can really steer clear, apart from the fact that the Memphis defense is very, very good, and they do restrict opposition shooting guards. So that might make him a high-rostered guy that would be one to fade, mainly based on that matchup. Garrett Temple in his revenge game, of course, at 4,300. He played all right last game, 25 points last time out against the Kings. I'm not really putting much faith in Garrett. At small forward, Kyle Anderson, he's listed probable. He's at 5,700. I think that's probably too high in FanDuel. He comes in looking a little bit better on some of the other sites, but I'm not super into him on FanDuel. That salary just feels a little bit too high. Well, Justin Jackson at 36. He had 22 last game, so if Shumpert and Bogdanovic are out, then Jackson does become an okay cash play at that limited salary. Well, Nemanja Bjelica at 6,000, that is too high for me. The power forwards, Green is at 4,700. JaMychal, not interested in that at all. While Jaren Jackson Jr., Triple J, he's at 6,600. He had 33 last game. He had 42 in an earlier season matchup against the Kings. He is always a strong tournament guy, but that's about it. While at center, Cauley Stein at 7,000 has a very interestingly positive record against Marc Gasol, and that's an interesting one. The Grizzlies have been a negative factor against centers this season, but Cauley Stein can buck that trend. I don't hate him. I think there are better options, but he is okay. While Gasol at 8,400, I'd really only consider Gasol at that price if Noah happens to be ruled out, because it does give Gasol just those extra 2 to 3 minutes. On DraftKings, there's a lot I like here. Kyle Anderson, Mike Conley, De'Aaron Fox, Marc Gasol. I think they've all got cash value. Cauley Stein also, and then you got Bogdanovic and Triple J as your tournament type of players. But Jaren Jackson's 5,800 is super appealing. on DraftKings. Let's go through to the next game. We're looking at the Utah Jazz and the Portland Trail Blazers. The Blazers are favored by 2 points. The total is 212. And Gobert versus Nurkic is our big down-low matchup that we need to pay attention to. The Jazz coming off that victory against the Golden State Warriors, while the Blazers beat the Memphis Grizzlies. At point guard, ravishing Rick Rubio. He is at 5,900. I don't really feel anything exciting there. While Dame Lillard at 9,400, he is almost a lock for 40, probably a 45er. I think that's a pretty strong cash and tournament scenario. Exum, Seth Curry, they're not doing it for me. At shooting guard, you got Don Mitchell or CJ McCollum, both guys who aren't really performing up to the level we hope. I actually like Mitchell quite a bit more. Look, his shot's not falling, but the dude still had 35 points against the Warriors despite shooting 18%. At 7,600, if he hits 5 more shots, and he smashes that value pretty comfortably. So I'm more in on Mitchell, whereas CJ at 6,300, just not really getting there at the moment, a little bit down, but has had a good record against the Jazz. And the other positive for CJ is the fact that his salary has dropped by $900. So he could be in discussions. I'd take Mitchell over him, but if you don't have that additional 1,300, then CJ is in play. Mo Harkless at 4,100, probably not. Jay Crowder at 53 really played well against the Warriors. Will he get that big opportunity against Portland? That remains to be seen, but he is a worthy tournament guy. While Jingle Joe got it back on track with 33 against the Warriors, but I don't think that he's necessarily the best play here. Derek Favors at 52, not interested there, while the Chief Al-Farouq Aminu.
Sometimes it may be good, sometimes it may be shit.
4,900 for the Chief. We're seeing the downturn here. He's averaging under 18 points in his last 3, under 21 in his last 5. Of course, he's got that 30-point upside. That makes him a GPP guy, but this is not a great matchup. While at center, it's Nurkic at 7,800. I love the matchup for Nurk. I think that there's a real chance here for a big 40-pointer. He has struggled against Gobert in the past, but also he's been limited in playing time in those last 3 games. Just 23 minutes and 28 points per game. Give him his 30 minutes here. I think we're looking at a potential 40-pointer, while Gobert is up at 8,500. His numbers have been fine at giving you 40 a night. It is a positive matchup for him as well. I'm not sure that spending that money on Gobert is necessarily the best way of constructing a lineup. I like Nurkic and Lillard quite a bit on DraftKings, and the Chief as well at 4,500. Jay Crowder at 5,000. A little bit of that tournament upside there. The last game of the day that we take a look at here is the New Orleans Pelicans and the Los Angeles Lakers. We've got quite a few injuries to talk about here with this game. Anthony Davis is questionable, as is Julius Randle, while Nick Mirotic is doubtful. While for the Lakers, Brandon Ingram, Rajon Rondo, and JaVale McGee are all questionable. So many different ways this can go. Now, of course, if Randle, Mirotic, and Davis are out, then there is a ton opening up. You got Darius Miller, Jahlil Okafor, Shek Diallo, Solomon Hill, although he's not really a fantasy option. But in that case, you have to look at Jahlil Okafor if all these guys are out, because there's going to be some big opportunities open up. Same with Darius Miller. Now, if the Lakers guys are out, well, it's pretty much what's been happening the last couple of games. But if they all come back, then Kyle Kuzma's value takes a hit. Josh Hart, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Lonzo Ball. Some real potential negative downturns in their sort of value. So this is a really up and down or up in the air sort of a game. It'd be hard to utilize any of these guys really from the Lakers side without understanding the injury scenario. So Lonzo or Rondo, I wouldn't be using Rondo regardless, but hard to use Lonzo at 7,000 with all these injuries. While Timmy Frazier on the other side, his numbers have really dropped off. And this is just exactly what Tim Frazier does. He comes out, he puts up 3 good games, and everyone gets really rock hard about it, and then he just falls back off and struggles. And this has just been the pattern in his career, and we should have seen it coming, but it's happened here. And he could just as well go out here and have 36 minutes and have 12 with 18 assists. That's a possibility, but the numbers have been really declining. At shooting guard, Drew Holiday's at 9,400. This could be a monster from Drew. If Davis, Randle, and Mirotic are all out, he could go for 60, so I would really be in on him. While the hitman Josh Hart at 45 and Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, I don't see the value in them at their current salaries.
LeBron James.
He's at 11,200. Yep, let's go. Really in on him. Of course, we heard that talk about LeBron, trying to recruit. I say that very loosely. That's it'd be cool to have Anthony Davis on your team. Like, no shit. Everyone thinks it'd be cool to have Anthony Davis on your team. Solomon Hill, Lance Stevenson, Wes Johnson, not really keen on any of them. Each one more the same. Darius Miller at 39 would be very interesting if another one of those front court guys are ruled out. 3,900 for Darius. He dropped 26 in 37 minutes last game. Now, Tone Davis is at 12,600. I think if Davis plays, it's still pretty good. He has obliterated the Lakers in the past. He shit his pants last game, played 29 minutes and had 57 points. Like, we're talking about 2 points per minute this guy can put up, which he's going to need to do, but he's the guy that can do it. The future MVP, Kyle Kuzma, if Ingram plays, that 7,200 is probably too high. If Ingram's out, then I think there's something there for Kuz. While at center, McGee, Chandler, no. Julius Randle's at 87. I wouldn't want to use him coming off an ankle injury, while Jahlil Okafor at 37. That could be one of your best tournament plays that you put in there on the hope that both of those, Davis and Randle, get ruled out. Although I imagine that Randle will sit and Davis will play. But that gives Okafor a bit of value. He had 27 points against the Bucks in 13 minutes. So there could be something there for Jahlil regardless of some of those injury statuses. On DraftKings, LeBron and Davis have the value over there, and it's still, everything's just so up in the air with how this game could potentially go, dependent on those injuries. There are quite a few scenarios that need to be sorted out with those things. Now, something I'm going to try and do a little bit more of now is just talk about some guys who have more value on one site versus another site. So I just reel off a couple of names who look to be in a better situation on FanDuel versus DraftKings. I think Rocket Rodney Hood, Jaylen Brown, Delon Wright. They're in better situations on FanDuel. You can look at someone like Thad Young, who's also in a better spot there. Miles Turner, Fred VanVleet, Tim Hardaway, LaMarcus Aldridge. They're all in positive situations on FanDuel compared to DraftKings. Where on the flip side of things, you've got Willie Cauley-Stein, Jarrett Allen, Kyle Anderson, Yusuf Nurkic, John Isaac, Chandler Hutchison, Trae Young, Dame Lillard. These guys are all, Kemba Walker, all in a much better positive pricing point or salary ratio over on DraftKings. So hopefully I'll remember to do that every episode. Let's go through and look at the studs and the values on DraftKings. I'm looking at Lillard as my stud and my value play as Yusuf Nurkic. On FanDuel, my stud is Drummond and my value play is Fred VanVleet. On Yahoo, my stud is Drummond and my value is VanVleet as well, while wrapping it up with DraftStars with my stud as LeBron and my value play as Josh Okogie at minimum salary. That'll do it for another week of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast. Make sure, guys, you do check out my video on trading in fantasy basketball. Plus, you can also see it as a part of this feed. It was the podcast released just before this, so subscribe to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball podcast, and I think it will explain a lot of the times when people ask me about trades and I say it depends. That should give you a fair explanation of why I say that. So go check that out. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, TuneIn, Stitcher, Spotify, or on YouTube, and follow me on Twitter at redrock_bball. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya. Buddy Hield.